welcome to Gaming the System, and we are going to do a deep dive into Resident Evil The Village today as one of our bonus rounds. So we've got myself, Jem, and Matt, and we're both big fans of the game, so we thought we'd get together and have a chat about it through our feminist lens. So I have been a long-term fan of Resident Evil since the early days, but I definitely had a bit of a break in the middle. But I heard such good things about Resident Evil: The Village, and I had just acquired my PS5, and so I felt that this was obviously serendipity bringing these two things together. So I decided to purchase the game and see what all the fuss was about. And actually, I have to say, I wasn't at all disappointed by it. I really enjoyed it, and I actually finished it, which is extremely rare and unlikely for me. So I'm just going to put a screen image up of the starting page. This is the loading screen. So this is what you see when you're waiting for it to start and when you're logging in, and it tells you very little about the actual game. Yeah, is this the character that you play, Matt? The picture, the guy in this image?
I'm not sure. It could be Chris Redfield.
It does look a bit like Chris, doesn't it? Yeah. So I'm not really sure what that's saying. I feel like maybe there's. So one of the things that we're going to learn today is how badly I follow the storyline. But I'm going to rely on Matt because he's usually pretty good at knowing what's actually been going on in a game. So, did you want to add anything, Matt?
Yeah. So my history of Resident Evil is quite limited. Because my interest basically started with Biohazard. I didn't play it, but it made such a cultural impact that I decided to watch it. I watched some good streamers play it, and it's stunning. It was really, really beautiful and awesome, and particularly the cutscenes where you see the other characters in great detail. Is awesome. The story is really good. It's really disgusting and gross. I love being able to see that captured. My only other Resident Evil was playing some of the old arcade games of it. They were fun, and quite apart from that, I love the film series as well.
Yeah,
that's my thing.
Yeah, I think we have talked about the films actually, and for me, certainly the first one was so evocative of the actual game that even though I think the film itself was, it's not going to win any Oscars, but it was just fun, and it was very true to the game, which was mostly running and screaming and shooting things in the dark. So Resident Evil has a lot of fond memories for me because I played it when I was living in a shared house, and we were all very hardcore gamers and spent all of our time in front of our PCs or our consoles. I did not own a console until many years later, but I just always used to use my housemates' consoles, and so we had Resident Evil. I think it was probably the first one or the second one. It was very early days, and we used to play it as a group. So we'd take it in turns to play and watch each other, but we had rule. Probably like people with box sets these days, where you couldn't watch it you couldn't play the game when other people weren't there. So you had, if you wanted to do your own playthrough, you had to do that separately. But we had like a group playthrough that we were all doing together. So we would pick a night and all sit around in the sitting room and play Resident Evil, and that was so much fun and so bonding, as such a bonding experience. And I think it's really interesting because when people talk about games and how games impact, you know, as such a solo experience and antisocial and all of these things, and actually in that scenario it was quite the opposite. And I have a really fond memory of fond memory of sort of pottering along in the game, and there was this giant, really giant moth came down to attack my character, and I screamed so loudly. And I'm not really a screamy person, actually, because my mum used to like get very cross with us if we ever screamed at home. She thought there was something wrong. So I'm not a screamy person, but I screamed the house down and just dropped the controller. My character just got completely trounced because I wasn't doing anything. And everyone around me was like, first of all, they thought I was just messing around. They thought, and then they realised I was actually really scared and really made me jump. So it was. And I mean, now when I look back at the graphics from those games, I'm not really sure how I was so immersed in it that was even remotely scary. But yeah, I think, you know, as a game, it's got a lot of fond memories for me. And
do you think Village has the same Resident Evil? Like, does it feel like Resident Evil like the original Resident Evils felt to you?
I think that parts of it did. Parts of it felt like that. When you're in the manor house, I think it was like a manor house or a castle, you're in a, and that did feel a lot like the early ones, because the earlier ones usually involved running around a mansion or a science facility and, you know, randomly opening doors and things. I think they've taken away quite a lot of the puzzle elements that were in the earlier ones. But I remember that my housemate and I used to laugh a lot about those puzzles, because it would be like you were supposedly in some mad scientist mansion, and then in order to open a door, you had to find a blue gem and a red gem that were scattered around the property, and then put them in the eyes of a cat that was at one end of the building, and that unlocked this door, which just felt like, from a gaming perspective, yes, obviously it gives you something to do, but from a consistency of story perspective, you know, world consistency, it just didn't make any sense. No one would live in a world like that. No one would live, you know, and this hyper sciencey person, why are they not just using like swipe cards, which were around at that point in time? So there was no real excuse. And I think they've taken a lot of that out of the later games. So I don't think it has that. I think the feel of it, there was definitely a similarity, but I did not feel as immersed in this storyline, I think, as I did in the older ones. I didn't have the same in the older games. I would be listening to hear. Could you hear the click, click, click of the dog creature's claws on the floor, or the sort of like low moan of a zombie, you know, and like, was there anything behind that corner, and, you know, is something going to jump out at you? So I didn't walk around with that same level of caution in this version. But I also think it's important to say that I think a lot of that is to do with my gaming maturity, and I think, you know, just in the same way as there's only so many stories that can be told, and the older you get, the more you're able to predict the way that a movie storyline is going to play out. I think the same happens with gaming. And I do think that I'm coming up against that a lot more these days than I used to. So I would understand the game mechanics more now. So when I was playing the Village, like, I knew, okay, I've killed all the monsters now. There's going to be a quiet period, or, oh, they're giving me loads of weapons. there's going to be a boss fight, you know. So I understand the mechanics in a way that perhaps I didn't used to understand, which I think breaks that, what's it called, the fourth wall, the third wall, fourth wall, yeah, and breaks that immersion.
I feel the same way slightly, in that you have a crescendo and then you have a break. Well, I think it's playing. If you've not played Alien Isolation, have you?
No,
I'd be really interested
any of the
to
aliens.
See. I'd be really interested to see your experience with that, because you are in perpetual danger.
Yeah,
there isn't a single time where there aren't any safe areas. There is no point where you can go, okay. And I think that really immerses you, and the threats change. But yeah, in this, it did feel like they've lent into the action horror more than survival horror.
Yeah,
because now you're decent with a gun, and there are less really scary things. So sort of like they scare you, and then you have to shoot everything.
Yeah.
And the way Lady Dimitrescu moves, it's always easy to get away from her, really.
Yes, yeah, and I definitely gained that on occasion. So yeah, I think
it's the sign of the very best games, which I think that you don't realize how well made a game is until you play it, and then you play a normal game. And this one feels like it's not easy to overcome that expectation that gamers learn. That's why games like the Dark Souls games and Sekiro games are so incredible, because they completely understand all the assumptions that gamers have learned over decades, and then they build their game to counteract those expectations. So you'll block when you think someone's about to attack, and then you stop your block, and then they hit you.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, Matt, so with that level of intent,
we're on different sides.
Shall I start again?
No, don't worry. It'll be funny. It'll be funny.
So I wanted to ask you about that, with that level of intensity in gaming, and that kind of like lack of having a break. I found that actually that was one of the things that kind of put me off playing Resident Evil Village this time, because I knew that I had there was a really long and involved fight, which I was quite pleased about, but I kind of came out the end of it and I was like, oh, I haven't really got very many bullets and things, and which is how you spend most of the early games of Resident Evil, worrying about ammo and sort of like when you're going to get your next sort of top up and things like that. But that was also something that put me off playing, because I was like, oh, you know what? I've had a really rubbish day. I don't want to sit down in the evening, because that's when I mostly get to play. I'm already tired. I really want to sit down and spend the next 2 hours going like, oh my God. Oh, I don't know if I want to go out like that. And so that actually, I actually sort of put the whole thing on pause for a few weeks as a result of that kind of thing. So for me, the kind of games, that kind of constant fear is something that I don't know if it would give me that immersion, or if it would just make it feel like a very exhausting thing to be doing. So.
Well, Alien Isolation is one of those games that is flawlessly crafted to deliver the experience it's meant to, which is to make you feel scared, but it gives you the only time. So it's not like an open world thing. You have a section which is a mission, and then you get to the end of that mission, and then you load the next area. And it's in that moment where it's loading where you go, oh.
Yeah.
But every second of it it's fun fear. It's that fear of there's goo dripping from that vent, and you'll go. It completely immerses you, and it takes away that fear of subsistency, because you can't kill the alien. The alien is invincible to you. So you're not just scrounging around going, oh, I haven't got many bullets this time.
Yeah.
It'll be a pain in the ass going and finding them. It's just you start the level and you're instantly in it every time, rather than having to go, oh, I know I just had a boss fight, so it's not going to be much for a little bit. So that's the benefit Alien Isolation has.
So when you're playing games like that, do you then feel like that you need to take a break and play something like some Nintendo game or something that's fluffier or less intense? Do you feel like you have to kind of balance them, or are you, is that your kind of preferred choice of game most of the time?
No, it was a while back that I played it. I tend to go through. I'm very glad that I'm changing this habit now. I'm playing multiple games at a time, which takes a lot of stress out of going, oh, what do I play next? But when I was playing Alien Isolation, I was just sort of, the story wraps you up so closely. You feel like, oh, I want to know what happens next, and every single mission is just completely just wraps you up in thinking. You're an engineer, so you go, I'm stuck on this ship, I need to make this happen, and then I need to make this happen, I need to make this happen. And all the while the alien is coming in different ways, and there are androids and there are people, and it's just, you constantly, it holds you and grips you and makes you want to go, oh, I want to get past, I want to see what happens. It's awesome.
So you're just tripping onto the next bit and the next bit. So when I was doing my degree, I wrote about online communities, but one of the thing that one of the sort of basis for my thinking was that the human heart, for want of a better word, just can't distinguish between the real and the imagined. That, you know, that's why dreams can have such a impact on our daily mood or whatever, because we our brain doesn't go, oh, that was just a dream, that's not real. We still have those feelings, and so this is one of the reasons why online relationships and online communities and things can exist, because just because somebody's just online doesn't necessarily change the bonds and the connections that you build up, because you still have an emotional response. But that research that kind of came out with that theory was looking at things like, if I die if I'm at risk, at danger in my game, you know, that you have very similar physical reactions to if you were really in danger. I think it probably isn't exactly the same, because I think there probably is a part of you that recognizes that this is just a game. But obviously it's the same sort of thing, isn't it, as why people go on carnival rides and roller coasters, or why we watch horror movies and thrillers and things. I mean, do those things all appeal to you as well? Do you think it's a whole thing about that this is a way that your sister, that you get your enjoyment, is from those kind of scary?
So Alien Isolation is the exception to the rule for me, because I don't normally play horror games. And I don't like horror movies particularly. I only like the really good ones. But if I'm watching a horror movie, because like you were saying, you can tell when a scary thing's about to happen. And I don't like the jumps, but I like the aftermath bit. So I'll go like that until the thing goes, "Whoa!" and then see what happens. But yeah, so I'm with things like this is exactly what I did with Village. Actually, I went through it quite quickly because I couldn't get immersed in it because it wasn't that kind of horror.
No.
I was looking at it as if it was like just mechanics and gameplay, because it didn't scare me in the way that it didn't give me that. It's like telling a joke. You want to make someone involuntarily laugh, and this it didn't involuntarily scare me.
No, I think that's a really good point, actually. Yeah, well, we could talk about the characters, couldn't we? And as we're on to stories, so the character that you play is Ethan, and I think I have a picture of him.
Oh yes. Where are you,
Cute
Ethan?
Matt.
Oh no. Oh no. Aha. Nondescript white man saves day.
Yeah. So this is, I mean, actually, it's quite interesting because when we were talking about this episode and I was looking for some pictures, I sort of said to Matt, like, well, why are there no pictures of Ethan coming up? And of course, you don't see him because you are him, so you don't see him. You're not outside of him. You're inside him, and so because it's first person, so you just see his hands really through the whole thing. So really, I probably should have shared a picture
his poor
of
hands.
His poorly hands, yeah, Rich. And I think it becomes increasingly obvious to anyone who lives in the real world that that Ethan is able to take a ridiculous amount of damage, and it's just that is one of the things that I do sometimes find a bit. That's what sort of stretches my immersion in some of these games. The one thing being the puzzles that we talked about, but also this idea that any ordinary person could actually go through these very extraordinary scenarios and be damaged by these creatures in the ways that they are. And that's usually is explained in Resident Evils over time, but yeah, that is something for me. So Ethan, I did not really engage with Ethan because I felt that he was a little bit too chill about the situation. I just felt that, I mean, there were definitely times I really like the fact that you could often hear him breathing, and in a situation where like it was a bit scary, you could hear like sort of stressed breathing going on. He did get kind of angry and annoyed with people at times, but I also felt like I'm not sure I would be shouting such, so aggressively at this really scary person with this massive great big hammer, or this. I just felt that his reaction to the situation was, it was like when they were designing him, they wanted to make him hardcore and everything, but they also recognized that given the setup, he would be scared, and they weren't quite sure how to get that balance right. And I think that was a bit jarring at times, and sort of, so I just actually found him quite annoying. What about you, Matt? How did you feel about
what I would have liked? I just think is it's hard to maintain an entire story on where's my daughter, where's my daughter, where's my daughter. That's the entire game. That's his sole driver, and it's just, I'm going to go into this castle to get this thing to save my daughter. I'm going to go into this lake to save my daughter. But what I would have liked to see, which would have been fun and interesting, was if he just progressively lost his shit more. You start off going, what's going on? What's going on? I'm scared. Then you go, hammer, okay. Come on then.
Yeah.
Give it a go. How could this day get any worse? I've killed the vampire lady now and the fish. Let's see what you can throw at me then.
Yeah.
Oh, you've stabbed me in the back. I'm just going, oh yeah, just laughing at it because, yeah, this is ridiculous. And going, yeah, I'm going to beat you all. That would have been fun.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think that's right, and I think that would have been a better way to have explored that whole, you know, to cope with his quandary that he
because you
was
would
in.
lose your shit.
Yeah.
And the longer you go through it, the more you think, I'm not dead yet. That's ridiculous. So I may as well be able to beat all of you.
Yeah. I'd like to it would be so awesome if we could get, you know, a writer, a game writer onto our podcast, because that's an area that I'm really fascinated by. You know, how do you even start with that? Because obviously you've got the overarching story, but the actual in-game scripts and, you know, the characterization and all of that, it is really interesting.
Absolutely, that's the main skill area that I would want to work in games. If I was just to be as part of a team, then writing would be my area. So yes, it'd be great to have an actual industry writer.
Well, this is an official call out to any games writers who would like to come and talk to us about their trade. So it's quite the game didn't feel linear in a lot of ways, in the way that some games do, but obviously it was very linear. It took you from one point to the next in a very specific order. And I think the next person that we come to is, and you have to say her name because I can't pronounce it.
Lady Dimitrescu, the sexy vampire lady.
We've got a picture of her, I think, as well.
Mm-hmm.
And she is almost the face of this game, isn't she? From sort of the media, and she has these 3 concubines, I guess.
These are her daughters.
Well, officially.
Yeah.
But
are you suggesting it's a lesbian vampire castle?
Yes, I am. That was my reading of it. No, she does very much talk about them as her daughters, and she does not like it when you go and kill them all. They weren't. She was awesome, and I felt that she was extremely well drawn and created. I felt that the graphics for that whole section were brilliant. The scene setting was brilliant. The atmosphere in the building, it felt like you were in an actual mansion. It felt like you were that was really a really immersive scene for me, section for me, and it was scary because she chases you about, and that is scary, walking around a corner and suddenly seeing her walking at you. I mean, I have a bit of a phobia about being chased. I think I'm not alone in that bit. But it really felt like I just, there was one time where I was like, oh no, I have to get over there and I've got to like avoid her. And so that was scary. And the same with her daughters. They would tip up at the most inconvenient moments, and I'd be like, but I just needed to get through there, and now I've got to run away. And I think it was good. It's good to play a game that's about running away, that involves running away, actually, that sometimes you just can't actually win this fight. And actually the sensible thing to do is to run away. And I think it was quite nice that they introduced that mechanic so early in the game, because it has an impact late, you know, as the game goes on, it changes the way that you play. It's a lot of these games you feel like, oh, if I just hit it hard enough, I'll be able to kill it. And it's good to know that actually, no, you can't. This is not the moment that you kill this, or you do not have the tools to do that yet. And so there was a while where I was just like, I just have to find the right way to kill this thing, and it wasn't working. And then I realized that actually, no, I just have to run away. And so that, I think that's kind of good, because that does give you that element of fear, because you can't just beat everything, and that's scary in itself.